I remember the exact moment when I realized my son no longer valued me as a person. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just announced my retirement after 40 years of work. Instead of congratulations, my son Michael leaned across his mahogany dining table and said, "Mom, you can't retire. What would you even do? You have no skills, no education, and no savings. You'd just be a burden to everyone around you." For 4 decades, I'd sacrificed everything for him. I worked nights so I could attend his daytime school events. I canceled my college plans to pay for his private education. I even mortgaged my modest home to fund his first business venture. Every milestone in his life had been built on the foundation of my sacrifices. But in that moment, as his cold words echoed in the room, something inside me finally broke. After a lifetime of putting him first, I realized I had raised someone who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be used and discarded. What Michael didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that my administrative assistant position at Westlake Industries wasn't just a job. I was the silent majority owner, having built the company from the ground up decades before. And now, ironically, his investment firm was attempting a hostile takeover of my company, completely unaware he was trying to seize control from his own mother. The look on his face when he finally discovered the truth would change our relationship forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Helen Davis, and for most of my adult life, people have underestimated me. I'm 62 years old, with silver-streaked dark hair that I've never bothered to dye, and hands that show every year of hard work I've put in. Most people, who know me, including my own son, see a simple, hard-working woman who's spent her career in administrative roles, struggling to make ends meet as a single mother. The reality is much more complex, much like most women's lives. I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, raised by parents who believed education was the path forward. I excelled in school, particularly in mathematics and business courses, and earned a scholarship to attend university in Chicago. My parents beamed with pride when I left home, the first in our family to pursue higher education. "Helen's going to run a company someday," my father would tell neighbors. During my sophomore year, I met Jack Davis. He was charismatic, ambitious, and 6 years older, already working at a prestigious financial firm downtown. I fell hard and fast, as young women often do for men who seem to have all the answers. When I discovered I was pregnant at 20, Jack suggested I take a break from my studies. "Just until the baby comes," he assured me. "Then you can go back." Michael was born in the winter of 1985, perfect and demanding from his first breath. By the time he was crawling, it became clear that Jack's vision of parenthood didn't align with the reality. He worked longer hours, came home later, and grew increasingly distant. When Michael was 4, Jack announced he'd accepted a position in London. "Come with me," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. When I asked about childcare, about resuming my education, about building my career, his answers were vague. "We'll figure it out," he promised, without meeting my eyes. I chose to stay. With a 4-year-old son and no degree, I found work as an administrative assistant at a manufacturing company called Harrington Tools. The pay was modest, but my supervisor, Patricia Westlake, recognized my aptitude for business and began involving me in projects beyond my job description. "You understand systems in a way most people don't," she told me after I reorganized their inventory management process, saving the company thousands. "You should be running a department, not answering phones." Patricia became my mentor and friend. She was 15 years older, sharp-minded and ambitious, with no children of her own. She often stayed late to teach me aspects of the business, and I absorbed everything eagerly, bringing Michael to the office with coloring books on evenings when I couldn't find childcare. 3 years into my time at Harrington, Patricia came to me with an idea. "I'm leaving to start my own company," she said, "and I want you to join me as my partner." I laughed at first. "I don't have money to invest in a startup." "You have something more valuable," she countered. "You understand how to build efficient operations from the ground up. I have the industry contacts and startup capital. Together, we could create something significant." And so Westlake Industries was born, named primarily after Patricia, but with a subtle nod to my middle name, Lynn. We started small, with a focus on specialized manufacturing components that Patricia knew were underserved in the market. I designed our operational systems while juggling single motherhood, often working from my small apartment after Michael went to bed. The first 2 years were lean and grueling. There were nights I cried in the shower so Michael wouldn't hear, overwhelmed by the responsibility of parenthood and entrepreneurship simultaneously. But slowly, steadily, we gained traction. By the time Michael started elementary school, Westlake had secured several significant contracts and moved into a proper office space. It was around this time that Jack re-entered our lives, having heard, through mutual friends, about my business venture. Suddenly, he wanted to be involved in Michael's life, to reconnect with his son. His renewed interest coincided suspiciously with Westlake's first profitable year. Jack's reappearance complicated everything. Michael, who had no real memories of his father, was initially wary but quickly enamored with this charismatic man who brought expensive gifts and made grand promises. I was concerned about how Jack's intermittent presence might affect Michael's emotional well-being, especially when Jack began suggesting he should have a say in major decisions regarding our son. Things came to a head when Jack filed for joint custody, claiming I was too busy with my secretarial job to properly care for Michael. He had no knowledge of my true role at Westlake. I had deliberately kept that private, knowing Jack would try to capitalize on any success I achieved. His custody petition referred to me repeatedly as an office assistant with unpredictable hours. The custody battle turned ugly quickly. Jack hired a private investigator who documented the late evenings I spent at Westlake, the weekends when I brought Michael to the office, the times when work emergencies meant last-minute childcare arrangements. Out of context, it painted a picture of a mother who prioritized work over her child, rather than a woman trying desperately to build security for her family's future. Patricia saw the toll the legal battle was taking. "We need to rethink how we're structuring things," she said one evening as we reviewed production reports. "Jack's using your role here against you. What if we changed how you appear on paper?" The plan we devised was meant to be temporary. On official documents, Patricia would be listed as founder and CEO, while I would step into an administrative role publicly. Behind the scenes, we would continue as equal partners, making decisions jointly and splitting profits according to our original agreement. The arrangement would protect me during the custody battle and shield Westlake from Jack's potential attempts to claim a portion of the business. "Once the custody issue is resolved, we'll revert to the original structure," Patricia assured me. The strategy worked. Without evidence of my executive role, Jack's claims about my unsuitable work schedule fell flat. The judge awarded me primary custody, with Jack receiving visitation rights every other weekend. Jack soon lost interest in these visits and eventually moved back to London permanently when Michael was 9, effectively disappearing from our lives again. But by then, our public-private arrangement at Westlake had taken on a life of its own. We had employees, clients, and vendors who knew me only as Patricia's highly capable assistant. The company was growing steadily, and disrupting the established dynamic seemed unnecessarily risky. Moreover, I found there were certain advantages to operating behind the scenes. People are remarkably honest around someone they perceive as just an administrative assistant, I told Patricia after sitting in on a vendor meeting where the supplier had been surprisingly candid about pricing structures. They don't guard their words the same way. So we maintained the charade. Years passed, and Westlake Industries flourished. We expanded into new markets, acquired smaller competitors, and established ourselves as an industry leader in specialized manufacturing components. From my nominally modest position, I shaped company strategy, negotiated major contracts, and built an operation that eventually employed over 300 people. All the while, I lived simply in the same modest 3-bedroom house in Riverside that I'd purchased when Michael was in elementary school. My salary, officially that of a senior administrative assistant, was comfortable but certainly not extravagant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Patricia and I had an arrangement where my true compensation was largely held in company ownership shares and in investments managed through channels entirely separate from my public identity. This unusual arrangement allowed me to give Michael a childhood that balanced comfort with important lessons about work and value. He didn't grow up with lavish privileges, but he never lacked for necessities. He attended good public schools rather than exclusive private academies. He wore nice clothes, but learned to wait for sales. He received thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays, but was taught that many things worth having required saving and patience. "Why can't I have a new gaming system like Jake?" he asked when he was 12, referring to his wealthier friend. Jake's dad says they can afford anything they want. "Because different families have different resources," I explained. "We have enough for what we need and some of what we want. That's more than many people have." I believed I was teaching him gratitude, perspective, and the value of hard work. What I didn't realize was that I was also unintentionally teaching him to measure people's worth by their apparent financial success, a lesson that would come back to haunt us both. Michael was bright and ambitious from an early age. He excelled academically and showed a particular aptitude for economics and business concepts. By high school, he had set his sights on prestigious universities and a career in finance or investment banking. "Like my father," he would say, having crafted an idealized image of Jack from minimal contact and social media glimpses of his supposedly glamorous life in London. I supported Michael's ambitions wholeheartedly, working extra hours at Westlake to ensure we could afford college application fees, campus visits, and eventually tuition supplements beyond what his scholarships covered. Patricia, who had become a beloved aunt figure to Michael, also contributed generously to his education fund, though he believed this was simply kindness from my boss rather than his mother's business partner. When Michael was accepted to Wharton for his undergraduate degree, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in his accomplishment, satisfaction in having provided him this opportunity, but also trepidation about the values of the world he was entering. The finance industry, with its emphasis on wealth accumulation and status, seemed at odds with the principles I had tried to instill. My concerns proved prescient. Michael graduated with honors and secured a position at a prestigious investment firm in Chicago. Over the next decade, he rose through the ranks, eventually founding his own boutique investment company specializing in acquisitions and restructuring, essentially buying companies he deemed undervalued or inefficient, reorganizing them, often through significant staff reductions, and selling them for profit. During these years, our relationship began to shift in subtle ways. Michael's calls became less frequent, his visits home more hurried. When we did speak, he increasingly dominated conversations with tales of deals closed and profits made, rarely asking about my life or work. He began referring to Riverside, where I still lived, as quaint, with a slightly condescending tone. When he was 32, Michael married Jennifer, a polished marketing executive from a wealthy North Shore family. Their wedding was lavish, held at her parents' country club with over 300 guests. I felt distinctly out of place among the assembled financial and social elites, despite having quietly helped fund a significant portion of the celebration, a contribution Michael had framed to Jennifer and her family as coming from a special savings account he'd been maintaining. Following the wedding, Michael and Jennifer purchased a sprawling home in an exclusive Chicago suburb. their lifestyle became increasingly luxurious. Expensive cars, frequent vacations, designer wardrobes. When I visited their home for the first time, Jennifer gave me a tour that felt more like a showcase than a welcome, pointing out imported fixtures and custom features with price tags casually mentioned. "Michael says you've worked in the same company since he was little," Jennifer remarked over dinner that evening. "Loyalty like that is so unusual these days." "Westlake has been good to me," I replied simply. "Still," she persisted, "administration work for 40 years. Didn't you ever want something more?" Michael jumped in before I could respond. "Mom values stability. Not everyone has ambition, Jen." I let the comment pass, as I had let so many others over the years. The truth that I had built Westlake alongside Patricia, that I owned nearly half the company, that my net worth likely exceeded their combined assets many times over, remained my closely guarded secret. Only Patricia, our company attorney Robert Winters, and our CFO James Chen knew the full truth of my position. I had maintained this dual identity for so long that it had become second nature. At Westlake, I moved between my public role as the capable assistant at the front desk and my private function as the strategic decision-maker in closed-door meetings. I had become adept at subtly guiding conversations, making suggestions that others would adopt as their own ideas, and wielding influence without apparent authority. At home, I lived modestly but comfortably. My investments, managed discreetly, through various channels, had performed exceptionally well over decades. I could have afforded a much more luxurious lifestyle but saw no need for it. My simple house was paid off, my garden was my pride and joy, and I took genuine pleasure in finding bargains rather than flaunting wealth. The only extravagance I occasionally permitted myself was travel, educational tours to historical sites and cultural centers around the world. I told Michael these trips were group excursions with special rates for seniors, rather than the privately guided experiences they actually were. Even here, I maintained my cover, staying in nice but not opulent accommodations and bringing back modest souvenirs. As Michael approached 40, his investment firm, Davis Capital Partners, began targeting larger acquisitions. He became increasingly focused on his professional legacy, speaking often about building something that would outlast him. I recognized in this ambition echoes of my own motivations when building Westlake, though Michael's approach centered more on financial engineering than creating lasting operational value. Meanwhile, at Westlake, significant changes were unfolding. Patricia, now in her late 70s, had been gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations for several years. We had installed a capable team of executives who believed they were reporting to Patricia while actually implementing strategies we had developed together behind closed doors. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything. Patricia had advanced pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim. Months, not years. As we sat in her sunroom after her first round of treatments, she broached the subject we'd both been avoiding. "We need to talk about succession, Helen," she said, her voice weaker, but her mind still sharp. "It's time to establish your rightful position." "We have a good management team in place," I replied. "The company will continue functioning while maintaining our arrangement." Patricia shook her head. "That's not sustainable, and you know it. You've been the heart and mind of this company for decades. Operating from the shadows worked when I was there as the public face, but that won't be the case much longer." "I've maintained this identity for 35 years, I reminded her. "I'm comfortable with it." "This isn't just about comfort, it's about legacy, yours and Westlake's." She reached for my hand. "My will transfers my ownership shares to you. That will give you 80% control. When that happens, questions will be asked." We spent Patricia's final months preparing for the transition. On paper, we developed a story about Patricia gradually transferring operational control to a management committee. In reality, we were documenting my role in the company's history, and preparing selected executives for the eventual revelation of my true position. Patricia passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 years before my story's pivotal moment in Michael's dining room. Per our agreement, her 30% ownership of Westlake transferred to me, added to the 50% I already held. The remaining 20% was distributed among key executives and an employee stock ownership plan. To the outside world, Westlake appeared to be operating under collective leadership following the founder's death. Only Robert Winters and James Chen knew that I was now the controlling shareholder and de facto CEO, still masquerading as an administrative assistant approaching retirement age. I had considered revealing myself then, but decided to maintain the status quo a while longer. Michael was entering a new phase in his career, and I was curious to see what path he would take without the knowledge of his connection to Westlake. Would his values and business ethics stand on their own when tested? It was, perhaps, the final test I set for the son I had raised. What I couldn't have anticipated was that this test would bring us to a direct collision course, with Michael's firm identifying Westlake as an acquisition target precisely because it appeared to be rudderless following Patricia's death. Nor could I have predicted how painfully clear that collision would make the gap between the values I had tried to instill and the man my son had become. Looking back now, I wonder if my decades-long charade was truly about protecting Michael from Jack's interference, about maintaining effective business operations, or about something deeper. Perhaps a fear of being fully seen, even by my own child. By the time I sat at Michael's dining table that Tuesday evening, prepared to finally share news of my retirement with my son, the weight of those unspoken truths felt almost unbearable. What I didn't know then was how much lighter I would feel once everything was finally in the open, despite the painful reckoning it would bring. That Tuesday evening at Michael and Jennifer's home started like many others. Their housekeeper Maria had prepared an elaborate meal, and their dining room gleamed with expensive tableware and fresh flowers, a setting designed to impress rather than welcome. I arrived promptly at 7, bringing a bottle of wine I knew Jennifer would quietly replace before serving. "Mom, you're right on time," Michael said, greeting me with a quick kiss on the cheek. His attention immediately returned to his phone, fingers tapping out responses to emails that apparently couldn't wait. Jennifer emerged from the kitchen, perfectly styled as always, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment when I was raising Michael. "Helen, so glad you could make it," she said with practiced warmth. "We have Barbara joining us tonight. You remember my mother? She's staying with us this week while their primary residence undergoes some renovations." Barbara Winters was a formidable woman in her late 60s, with professionally colored blonde hair and the kind of surgical enhancements that spoke of wealth and vanity in equal measure. She'd never approved of Michael as a suitable match for her daughter, making little attempt to hide her belief that Jennifer had married beneath her station. Her presence immediately changed the dynamic of what I had hoped would be an intimate family dinner where I could share my news. Cocktails were served in the living room, where Michael immediately launched into a detailed explanation of his latest business venture. "We're looking at mid-sized manufacturing companies that have lost direction," he explained, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal tumbler. "Companies with solid fundamentals but weak leadership, ripe for restructuring and significant value enhancement. Michael's latest target is particularly promising," Jennifer added with obvious pride. "A company called Westlake Industries. Their founder died a few years ago, and they've been drifting ever since." The casual mention of Westlake, my company, sent a jolt through me that I carefully concealed behind my wine glass. So, this wasn't just idle talk. Michael's firm was actively targeting Westlake for acquisition. I had heard rumors from our executive team about interested buyers, but I hadn't connected it to Michael's firm. "That sounds interesting," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What makes Westlake an attractive target?" Michael launched into an analysis that was simultaneously impressive in its thoroughness and disturbing in its coldness. "Good underlying assets, stable client base, outdated operational structure. Their leadership is fragmented since the founder died. Committee style. Management never works long-term. We estimate we could increase profitability by at least 40% within 18 months. Through efficiency improvements? I asked, knowing exactly what that euphemism typically meant. Partly, Michael nodded. Their administrative overhead is bloated. Too many long-term employees with inflated salaries and benefits packages that don't align with market rates. We'd streamline that immediately. Long-term employees like me, I thought. People who had dedicated decades to building Westlake, from nothing into a company now valuable enough to attract vultures like my son. People whose livelihoods would be sacrificed for quick profit margins. Sounds like a lot of jobs might be eliminated, I observed. Jennifer waved a dismissive hand. That's business, Helen. Companies aren't charities. They exist to generate shareholder returns, not provide lifetime employment. Exactly. Barbara nodded approvingly at her daughter. Michael understands that sentiment has no place in proper business management. I took another sip of wine, thinking about Westlake's manufacturing floor supervisor, Tom, who had put 3 children through college on his steady salary. About Diane in accounting, a single mother who relied on our flexible work arrangements. About dozens of others whose lives would be upended if Michael's acquisition succeeded. Is the deal moving forward? I asked. We're in the final stages of securing investor commitments, Michael replied. The board vote is scheduled for next Friday. We've already got preliminary approval from several key members. Board members who had no idea I held controlling interest, I realized. Members who believed they were dealing with a company managed by committee rather than one owned primarily by a single shareholder, me. When Maria announced dinner was ready, we moved to the dining table. The conversation shifted briefly to Barbara's country club politics and Jennifer's charity committee work. I waited for a natural pause, then took a deep breath. I have some news to share, I said, setting down my fork. I've decided to retire next month. There was a moment of surprised silence before Michael let out a short laugh. Retire? What are you talking about, Mom? I've been working for over 40 years, I explained. I'm 62 now, and I'd like to have some time for myself. I've put in my notice at Westlake. But why now? Michael frowned. You always said you'd work until 65 at least, to maximize your Social Security benefits. Plans change, I said simply. I've calculated my finances and I can manage comfortably. Jennifer exchanged a skeptical glance with her mother. On an administrative assistance pension? That seems optimistic. I've been saving for a long time, I replied, and my needs are modest. Michael set down his knife and fork with deliberate care. Mom, be realistic. You have at least 15 years ahead of you, possibly more given your health. Inflation alone will eat through whatever savings you've accumulated. I've accounted for that, I assured him. Have you? Really? His tone shifted from concerned to condescending. Because financial planning isn't just about having a number in a bank account. It's about projections, contingencies, healthcare costs. Michael's right, Barbara interjected. Women especially tend to underestimate longevity, risks in retirement planning. My financial advisor has excellent data on this. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the sensation that always arose when people spoke about me as if I weren't present, or as if my thoughts and decisions held no weight. It had happened throughout my career, when men in meetings would redirect questions about my proposals to male colleagues. It happened when Michael's teachers would ask if his father would be attending conferences, assuming important decisions required a man's input. And it was happening now, at this table, as 3 people casually dismissed my carefully considered life choice. I appreciate the concern, I said firmly, but my decision is made. I've submitted my resignation, effective next month. Michael's expression darkened. You did this without even consulting me? Mom, this is exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making that's gotten you into trouble before. Impulsive, I echoed, genuinely confused. I've been planning this for years. Like you planned to go back to college when I was in high school? Or how you planned to sell the house and move to a condo downtown 5 years ago. You talk about these things but never follow through because they're not financially viable. The examples stung because they contained partial truths. I had considered returning to complete my degree several times over the years, but always prioritized Michael's needs instead. The condo idea had been mentioned casually once during a downtown festival, not as a serious intention. Yet Michael had cataloged these passing thoughts as evidence of my supposed financial irresponsibility. This is different, I said. I've given formal notice. I've calculated my pension, my savings, my Social Security benefits. I've accounted for healthcare costs and inflation. Jennifer sighed dramatically. Helen, no offense, but calculating Excel spreadsheets for office supply orders doesn't qualify you to manage complex retirement planning. Michael handles investments for corporations worth hundreds of millions. Maybe listen to his expertise? Before I could respond, Michael continued, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when explaining supposedly complex concepts. Mom, here's the reality. You have your house, which has maybe $300,000 in equity if we're being generous. You have whatever you've managed to save from your salary, which, given what administrative positions at mid-sized manufacturers typically pay, is probably under $100,000. Your pension, if Westlake even still offers one, would be minimal. Social. Security might give you $1,800 a month. That's not enough to retire on, Barbara declared with absolute certainty. Not even close, Jennifer agreed. And what about emergencies? Health crises? What's your plan then? I opened my mouth to explain that I had more than adequate resources, that my modest savings included diversified investments worth millions, properties in 3 states, and significant retirement accounts, but stopped myself. For 35 years, I had maintained my cover story. Did I really want to reveal everything now, at this table, in response to their condescension? I have contingency plans, I said instead. Michael's frustration visibly mounted. No, you don't, Mom. That's the problem. You've never had contingency plans. When Dad left, you had no plan. When the furnace died during that cold snap in '98, you had no plan. When you needed dental surgery in 2005, you had no plan then either. Every time, who helped you? I did, because that's what family does. Each example he cited twisted the knife deeper. The furnace repair had been handled by a maintenance service I'd paid for myself, though I'd allowed Michael to believe he'd rescued me by finding the company. The dental work had been fully covered by my insurance, but I'd accepted his offer to drive me home after the procedure. Small kindnesses I'd welcomed as bonding moments had apparently been tallied as evidence of my incompetence. Michael, I said quietly, I managed to raise you on my own, keep a roof over our heads, put food on the table, and help you through college. I'm not completely helpless. You struggled every step of the way, he countered. And you made sacrifices you didn't need to make because you refused to pursue better opportunities. How many times did I tell you to look for a better job? To ask for promotions? To develop actual marketable skills? Each word landed like a slap. Marketable skills. As if building a $400 million company from scratch required no skill. As if the business acumen that had guided Westlake through 4 decades of growth and profitability had no market value. Mom, you can't retire, Michael continued, his tone now definitive. It's financially irresponsible, and frankly, what would you even do all day? You've defined yourself by your work for decades. Without that, you'd be lost. Barbara nodded sagely. Empty nest syndrome doesn't just happen when children leave, Helen. It can happen when you leave your job, too. People without purpose often decline rapidly. I have many interests, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I want to travel, read, take classes, volunteer. All of which costs money, Jennifer pointed out. Travel especially isn't cheap, Helen. A Mediterranean cruise can run $10,000 easily. Which is why you need to keep working, Michael concluded, as if the matter was settled. At least until you're 67, maybe longer. I've made my decision, I repeated. I'm retiring next month. Michael exhaled sharply, frustration evident in every line of his body. Mom, you're not listening. You cannot afford to retire. Period. End of discussion. It's my life, Michael, not yours. His expression hardened. Yes, but when your decisions inevitably lead to financial disaster, who do you think will have to pick up the pieces? Me. It's always me. Just like it's always been me. I've never asked you for financial support, I reminded him, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Because I've always stepped in before you had to ask. His voice rose. The property tax shortfall in 2010? The water heater replacement in 2017? The ridiculous medical copays from your knee surgery? Who handled all of that? I did, because I've always taken care of you when you couldn't take care of yourself. Each example was a distortion of reality. The property tax shortfall had been my allowing him to contribute when he'd insisted on helping. The water heater had been replaced as part of a larger renovation I'd fully funded. The knee surgery copays had been minimal. His contribution a gesture I'd accepted to make him feel involved in my care. Michael, I appreciate everything you've done, but no, you clearly don't, he interrupted, anger now plainly visible. Because if you did, you wouldn't be making another irresponsible decision that will ultimately impact me and Jennifer. We're starting a family soon. We have the house renovation. I'm in the middle of the biggest deal of my career. The last thing we need is to worry about you draining your meager savings in some misguided bid for independence. The phrase, misguided bid for independence, hung in the air between us. Was that truly how he saw me? As someone incapable of independence? As a burden to be managed rather than a person with agency and capability? I think I should go, I said, placing my napkin beside my barely touched dinner. Don't be dramatic, Mom. Michael sighed. We're just trying to help you make a rational decision. No, I said, rising from my chair. You're trying to make me feel worthless, and I won't sit here for it. Jennifer rolled her eyes. And there's the victim card. Classic Helen. Helen. Barbara leaned forward, her voice taking on a confidential tone as if offering rare wisdom. Women in our generation often struggle with realistic financial assessment. There's no shame in accepting guidance from those more experienced in these matters. I looked at the three of them, my son, who I'd sacrificed everything for, his wife, who had never known struggle, and her mother, who had judged me from the moment we met. They all stared back with identical expressions of condescending concern. Thank you for dinner, I said quietly, picking up my purse and cardigan. I'll see myself out. Mom, stop overreacting, Michael called after me. This conversation isn't finished. But it was. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. For 35 years, I had maintained a careful facade, downplaying my success, accepting underestimation, allowing Michael to believe I needed his guidance and protection. I had done it initially to secure his future, then out of habit, and finally from a vague fear that revealing the truth might somehow diminish him or damage our relationship. Yet here we were, our relationship already damaged, not by my deception, but by his fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I was capable of. The woman he described at that dinner table, financially naive, professionally stagnant, incapable of independence, was a stranger to me. That wasn't who I was or had ever been, and I was suddenly, painfully tired of pretending otherwise. I drove home in silence, no radio, no phone calls, just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own thoughts tumbling over each other. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the modest 3-bedroom ranch that Michael so often derided as inadequate, I had reached a decision. Inside, I moved directly to my home office, a small room that Michael believed I used primarily for cataloging family photos and paying bills. In reality, it was the command center for my other life, the life he knew nothing about. I opened my laptop and sent a simple email to Robert Winters, Westlake's attorney. Time for a change. Meet tomorrow, 9 a.m. Robert's response came within minutes. Been waiting for this. See you then. That night, I pulled out a leather portfolio I kept in my bedroom safe, documents I hadn't reviewed in years. The original partnership agreement between Patricia and me, the amended ownership structure after her passing, the elaborate trust arrangements that had protected my assets while maintaining my public persona. For over 3 decades, these papers had represented a necessary shield, protection for Michael, for the company, and in some ways, for me. Now they felt like prison bars, constraining me in a role I had long outgrown. As I spread the documents across my bed, my phone buzzed, repeatedly with texts from Michael. "Mom, you're overreacting. We need to finish our discussion. This is exactly the emotional decision-making I'm talking about. Call me when you're thinking clearly." I didn't respond. Instead, I began making notes for my meeting with Robert, outlining the steps needed to reclaim my true identity and position. By midnight, I had a clear plan, not just for revealing myself as Westlake's owner, but for reclaiming the fullness of who I was beyond the limited role I'd allowed Michael to see. The next morning, I dressed differently than usual. Instead of the practical, unremarkable clothes I typically wore to Westlake, I selected a tailored charcoal suit I'd purchased for board meetings, but kept at my vacation home in Michigan to avoid Michael's questions. I styled my hair with more attention, applied makeup with precision, and chose accessories that conveyed authority rather than blending into the background. When I arrived at Westlake's headquarters, a modern 4-story building in an office park west of Chicago, I parked in my usual spot rather than the reserved space that was technically mine as CEO. Some habits were hard to break, and the full transition would take time. Linda, the front desk receptionist, looked up with her usual warm smile that quickly transformed into surprise. "Helen, you look amazing today. Special occasion?" "Something like that," I replied with a smile. "Is the executive conference room available?" Linda looked momentarily confused. The executive conference room was generally reserved for leadership meetings and board sessions, not something an administrative assistant would typically book. "I think so, but don't you want me to check the schedule?" "No need," I said, confidently. "Please let Robert Winters know I'd like to see him there at 10 a.m. "Robert Winters? The company attorney?" Her confusion deepened. "Wouldn't Mr. Chen need to arrange that?" "Not today," I replied, already walking toward my modest desk in the administrative area. "Just let Robert know, please." I spent the next hour completing my regular administrative tasks, answering emails, routing calls, organizing the weekly staff schedule. To anyone observing, it appeared to be a perfectly normal morning, save for my more formal attire. At 9:45, I gathered several files and walked purposefully toward the elevator that would take me to the executive floor. As I stepped off on the 4th floor, I encountered Diane, executive assistant to Gerald Fisher, who had been serving as interim CEO since Patricia's death. Diane's eyebrows rose as she took in my appearance and unexpected presence in the executive suite. "Helen, can I help you with something?" she asked, clearly surprised. "I'm using the conference room for a meeting," I explained pleasantly. Diane frowned slightly. "I don't see anything on the schedule. Who authorized that?" "I did," I replied simply. Her eyebrows shot up. "You did? I don't understand." You will soon enough, I assured her. Please don't disturb us unless it's an emergency. Leaving Diane staring after me in confusion, I entered the conference room and began setting up my materials. At precisely 10 a.m., Robert arrived, followed by James Chen, our CFO. Both men had been among Patricia's most trusted executives and were among the very few who knew my true position at Westlake. Are you sure about this? Robert asked quietly after closing the door. It's time, I replied. Michael's investment firm is trying to acquire Westlake. The board vote is scheduled for next Friday. James looked startled. Your son's firm? Davis Capital Partners? I nodded. He has no idea who really owns the company. He believes I'm just a secretary with a handful of employee shares. That's going to be an uncomfortable revelation, James winced. Necessary nonetheless, I replied firmly. I've allowed this situation to continue far too long. It's time for Westlake to have a public CEO again, the real one. We spent the next hour reviewing the legal and financial details of my transition from shadow executive to public leader. Robert outlined the regulatory filings that would need to be updated. James prepared financial briefings for the board. We drafted a communication plan for employees, clients, and industry partners. We should schedule an emergency board meeting, Robert suggested, before the acquisition vote next Friday. Agreed, I nodded. Let's aim for Wednesday. That gives us 5 days to prepare everything properly. And what about your son? James asked carefully. When will you tell him? I considered this for a moment. Let him come to the board meeting expecting to present his acquisition proposal. He'll learn the truth along with everyone else. That's going to be quite a shock, Robert observed. Yes, I acknowledged, but perhaps a necessary one. When I returned to my desk after the meeting, I found a message from Michael. Any thought about those shares? Need your decision by Friday. I texted back, I'll have an answer for you Friday afternoon. Why don't you come to Westlake around 3 p.m.? We can sign any paperwork then. His reply came quickly. Perfect. You're doing the right thing, Mom. The irony of his response wasn't lost on me. Michael assumed I was capitulating to his demands, agreeing to sign over my presumed small stake in Westlake to strengthen his acquisition bid. He had no idea that Friday's meeting would completely redefine our relationship and his understanding of who his mother truly was. Over the next few days, I maintained my usual routine at Westlake while secretly working with Robert and James to prepare for Wednesday's board meeting. We assembled comprehensive financial reports demonstrating the company's strong performance. Under my leadership, documentation of my ownership position, and a strategic plan for Westlake's future as an independent entity. The night before the board meeting, I sat in my garden, watching twilight settle over the neat rows of vegetables and herbs I'd tended for years. This modest garden had been a source of quiet pride, tangible evidence of my ability to nurture and sustain growth. Tomorrow, I would finally claim public recognition for the much larger entity I had nurtured from seed to maturity. I thought about Michael, about the shock and disbelief he would experience upon learning the truth. Would he be angry, hurt, embarrassed? Probably all three. Would our relationship survive this revelation? I didn't know. But I did know that continuing the charade would only perpetuate a fundamentally dishonest dynamic between us. Whatever happened next, it would be based on truth rather than carefully maintained illusions. That alone felt like progress. Wednesday morning arrived with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I dressed in my most authoritative outfit, a tailored navy suit with subtle pinstripes, paired with a silk blouse and the pearl necklace Patricia had given me on our 25th anniversary of founding Westlake together. When I arrived at the office, I went directly to my administrative desk one last time, completing a few final tasks before the meeting that would transform everything. At 9:45, I gathered my materials and took the elevator to the executive floor, where Robert was waiting. The board members are arriving, he informed me. They've been told only that there's an urgent matter requiring immediate attention before Friday's acquisition vote. Perfect, I nodded. Let's not keep them waiting. The Westlake board consisted of 8 members: Gerald Fisher, our interim CEO, James Chen, our CFO, 3 long-serving executives who had been appointed during Patricia's leadership, and 2 independent directors from related industries. As I entered the boardroom with Robert, their expressions ranged from confusion to mild annoyance at my presence. "Helen?" Gerald frowned. "Is there a problem with the meeting arrangements?" Robert stepped forward. "Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for coming on such short notice. Helen Davis has called this emergency session, and she'll be chairing today's meeting." Gerald's frown deepened. "I don't understand. Why would an administrative assistant be chairing a board meeting?" I moved to the head of the table and remained standing as the board members exchanged puzzled glances. "Thank you all for coming today. Before we begin, I'd like to clarify something about Westlake Industries that many of you don't know." I paused, looking around the table at the faces of people who had known me for years but never truly seen me. Patricia Westlake and I founded this company together 37 years ago. When I became a single mother, we made a strategic decision for me to step back from public leadership to protect my privacy and allow me to raise my son. The room had gone completely silent. Patricia became the face of Westlake, while I maintained operational control behind the scenes. Most of you know me as an administrative assistant, but in reality, I've been a silent partner and co-executive all these years. When Patricia passed away, her 30% share of the company transferred to me, as per our long-standing agreement. I slid copies of legal documentation across the table. As you can see, I currently hold 80% ownership of Westlake Industries. Stunned silence gave way to murmurs of disbelief as the board members reviewed the paperwork before them. "This is extraordinary," said Elizabeth Carter, one of our independent directors. "You've been running this company from an administrative desk?" "Yes," I confirmed, while also reviewing every major contract, approving all strategic initiatives, and working with Patricia on every significant decision this company has made for 3 decades. We simply found it convenient to maintain the arrangement after my personal circumstances changed. Gerald looked like he'd been struck. "But I've been serving as interim CEO for the past 3 years. Under my guidance," I nodded. "Every significant decision has come through me, usually presented as suggestions from administrative staff or filtered through Robert or James." The board members exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. "I've called this meeting because my son's investment firm, Davis Capital Partners, is attempting to acquire Westlake. The vote is scheduled for Friday. Michael Davis believes the company has been rudderless since Patricia's death and plans to implement significant restructuring if his bid succeeds." Robert distributed detailed financial analyses. "This is a complete assessment of the acquisition offer. As you'll see, it significantly undervalues Westlake's assets and projects approximately 40% workforce reduction as part of the efficiency improvements." For the next hour, we walked through Davis Capital's proposal and my counter-strategy. I outlined my vision for Westlake's future, emphasizing sustainable growth, employee retention, and innovation rather than short-term profit maximization through layoffs and asset sales. By the end of the presentation, the board's initial shock had transformed into a mix of respect and strategic focus. The vote to reject the acquisition offer was unanimous. The vote to formally appoint me as CEO was equally decisive. "Shall we notify Davis Capital of our decision immediately?" Gerald asked, still clearly processing his unexpected transition from interim CEO to regular board member. "Not yet," I replied. "Michael Davis is coming here Friday afternoon, expecting to meet with me about what he believes are my employee shares. I think it would be appropriate for all of us to be present for that conversation." Elizabeth Carter smiled slightly. "That promises to be a rather memorable meeting." "Indeed," I agreed, "and long overdue." When the board meeting concluded, I moved directly into Patricia's old office, my office now, and began the process of claiming the space that had rightfully been mine for decades. By Friday, the transformation would be complete, both physically and organizationally. As I settled behind the expansive desk overlooking the manufacturing campus below, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in finally acknowledging my true role, apprehension about Michael's reaction, and a curious sense of liberation. After 35 years of hiding in plain sight, I was finally stepping fully into the light. The woman who would meet Michael on Friday would not be the mother he thought he knew: deferential, financially insecure, professionally stagnant. She would be Helen Davis, CEO and controlling shareholder of Westlake Industries, a woman who had built a $400 million company while raising a son who never suspected his mother was anything more than what she appeared to be. The revelation would shatter his perception of me, of our shared history, and perhaps of himself. But from those shattered pieces, maybe we could build something new. A relationship based on truth and mutual respect, rather than misconception and condescension. It was time for both of us to see each other clearly, at last. Friday arrived with a sense of inevitability. I spent the morning finalizing preparations for my meeting with Michael, reviewing key company data, and rehearsing what I would say. This confrontation had been decades in the making, though neither of us had known it until now. The executive office, my office, had been fully transformed. Patricia's personal mementos had been respectfully packed away, replaced by items that reflected my leadership. Awards Westlake had won during my tenure, previously displayed in the main lobby, strategic plans I had authored, and a single photograph of Patricia and me at the company's 10th anniversary celebration, arms linked, faces bright with the knowledge of what we were building together. At 2:30, I gathered with the board members in the main conference room. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, like actors awaiting their cue before a pivotal scene. "Is everyone clear on how this will proceed?" I asked, surveying the faces around me. They nodded, some with barely concealed curiosity about the personal drama about to unfold. I couldn't blame them. It wasn't every day that a company's CEO revealed herself to be the mother of the man attempting a hostile takeover. At precisely 3 p.m., Linda's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Davis, your son has arrived. Please send him up to the executive conference room," I replied, using my CEO voice. Firm, authoritative, nothing like the warm maternal tone Michael was accustomed to. A few minutes later, Michael strode into the reception area of the executive floor. I watched through the glass wall of the conference room as he approached Diane's desk with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to deference. "Michael Davis for Helen Davis," he announced. "She's expecting me." Diane smiled professionally. "Yes, Mr. Davis. Please go right into the main conference room." Michael turned toward the conference room, his step faltering slightly when he saw the assembled board members through the glass. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion as he pushed open the door. "Mom?" His eyes found me at the head of the table. "What's going on? Why are all these people here?" I stood, dressed in my navy suit, every inch the executive. "Hello, Michael. Thank you for coming. Please take a seat." He remained standing, glancing around at the board members watching this exchange with careful expressions. "I thought we were meeting about your shares, privately." "We are discussing my shares," I confirmed, "but as this impacts the entire company, the board should be present." I gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit down." Reluctantly, Michael took the offered seat, setting his leather portfolio on the table. His eyes kept darting between me and the other executives, clearly trying to make sense of the unusual setup. "Allow me to make introductions," I said smoothly. "Board members, this is Michael Davis, CEO of Davis Capital Partners. Michael, you know James Chen, our CFO. This is Robert Winters, our legal counsel. Gerald Fisher, Elizabeth Carter, Thomas Nguyen, Sandra Reeves, and William Blackwell complete our board. Michael nodded tersely in acknowledgement, his posture stiff. I don't understand why this requires an audience, Mom. We're just handling your employee stock options. I took a deep breath, the moment of truth finally at hand. That's not entirely accurate, Michael. We're here to discuss Westlake's ownership and future direction. The acquisition proposal is being handled through proper channels, he replied, frowning. Unless... Have you somehow convinced the board to hear your concerns? Mom, with all due respect, this isn't appropriate. Michael, I interrupted gently. There's something you need to understand about Westlake Industries and about me. I met his eyes directly. I am not just an administrative assistant with a few employee shares. Patricia Westlake and I founded this company together 37 years ago. He stared at me blankly for a moment, then let out a short, disbelieving laugh. What are you talking about? You've always been a secretary. No, I corrected. I chose to appear that way. Patricia and I made that decision when I became a single mother, to protect my privacy and allow me to raise you without the complications of being a visible executive. Michael's face flushed. This isn't funny, Mom. Whatever game you're playing. It's not a game, Robert intervened, sliding legal documents across the table. These are the original partnership agreements between Helen Davis and Patricia Westlake, dating back to 1988. And these, he added, providing another set of papers, are the current ownership records. As you can see, your mother holds 80% controlling interest in Westlake Industries. Michael stared at the documents, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the beginning stages of anger. This can't be real, he muttered, flipping through the pages with increasing agitation. This is some kind of stunt to block the acquisition. I assure you, it's entirely genuine, I said quietly. I've been making executive decisions at this company for 37 years, most recently as the de facto CEO following Patricia's death 3 years ago. Michael's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a dawning realization. 3 years? You've been running this company for 3 years and never said a word? I've been running this company since before you were born, I clarified. The only change after Patricia died was the formal transfer of her ownership shares to me, per our long-standing agreement. The color drained from Michael's face as the full implications began to sink in. The company I've been targeting for acquisition is yours? You're the majority owner of Westlake. Yes. And you let me proceed with this deal? You watched me invest months of work, make commitments to investors, stake my professional reputation on this acquisition. Knowing all along you could veto it with a single word? His voice had risen, drawing concerned glances from the board members. I remained calm, keeping my tone measured. I didn't know Davis Capital was targeting Westlake until you mentioned it at dinner Tuesday night, I explained. By then, you were already deep into the process. That's why I called this emergency board meeting. Michael slammed his hand on the table, making several board members flinch. This is insane. My own. Mother has been lying to me my entire life. Not lying, I countered. Protecting you. And later, protecting your opportunity to build your own success, rather than living in my shadow. Protecting me? He echoed incredulously. By making me believe you were struggling financially? By accepting my help with expenses you didn't even need help with? By letting me worry about your retirement when all along you were... What? A secret millionaire? The raw hurt in his voice struck me more deeply than his anger. In that moment, I saw clearly how my well-intentioned deception looked from his perspective, not as protection, but as manipulation, a calculated denial of truth that had shaped our entire relationship. Michael, I never meant to hurt you, I said softly. When you were young, this arrangement was necessary to shield you from your father's interference. As you grew older, It seemed better to let you find your own path rather than relying on my position or success. Better for whom? He demanded. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to succeed? The sacrifices I made? The pressure I felt to achieve financial security not just for myself, but for you too? I hadn't anticipated this particular angle of his pain, that my perceived financial insecurity had been a driving force in his career choices. I wanted you to develop your own work ethic, your own values, I tried to explain. Not to feel entitled to success because of who your mother was. So instead, you lied. For decades. Michael laughed bitterly. The irony is incredible. All those years you lectured me about honesty, about integrity, and the whole time you were living a complete fabrication. The board members shifted uncomfortably, witnesses to a deeply personal confrontation none of them had anticipated. Elizabeth Carter cleared her throat softly. Perhaps we should give you two some privacy for this conversation, she suggested, making a move to stand. No, Michael cut in sharply. This isn't just a family matter anymore. This is about business. He turned back to me, his expression hardening. So what happens now? You've revealed yourself as the secret owner just in time to block my acquisition? Is that the plan? The board has already voted unanimously to reject Davis Capital's proposal, I confirmed. Westlake is not for sale. Michael's jaw tightened. On what grounds? James Chen stepped in, his tone professional despite the tension. The offer significantly undervalues Westlake's assets and intellectual property. Moreover, the proposed restructuring would eliminate approximately 40% of our workforce, skilled employees who have been instrumental to our success. That's business, Michael shot back. Companies aren't social welfare programs. They exist to generate shareholder returns. And as the primary shareholder, I replied evenly, I disagree with your vision for this company. Westlake was built on values beyond quarterly profits, quality, innovation, and treating our employees as assets rather than expenses to be minimized. Michael stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of betrayal, humiliation, and something close to hatred. You set me up, he said quietly. You let me walk into this blind. You could have told me at any point, but you chose this moment, this public way, to maximize my embarrassment. That wasn't my intention, I sighed. I had hoped. What? That we'd have a heartwarming reunion? That I'd be thrilled to discover my mother has been deceiving me my entire life? He stood abruptly, gathering his papers with jerky movements. This isn't over. You may own 80% of Westlake, but I'll find a way to challenge this. There must be regulatory violations, disclosure issues. There aren't, Robert interjected calmly. Everything has been handled in full compliance with SEC regulations and corporate governance requirements. Unusual as the arrangement may have been, it was entirely legal. Michael looked from Robert to me, then around at the board members watching this painful exchange. The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly, replaced by cold fury. Congratulations, Mom, he said flatly. You've managed to destroy both my professional credibility and our relationship in one masterful stroke. Quite the achievement. The words cut deep, but I maintained my composure. I'm sorry it came to this, Michael. Truly. But perhaps when you've had time to process everything. Process what? That my mother is a pathological liar? That my entire childhood was built on false pretenses? That I've been made to look like a complete fool in front of my industry peers? He shook his head. There's nothing to process. We're done. With that, he strode toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. I'll need to notify my investors about this. Development? I assume Westlake will be issuing a public statement. Yes, I confirmed. We'll be announcing my formal appointment as CEO on Monday. He nodded curtly. At least give me 48 hours before you go public. I need to manage the fallout with my firm. Of course, I agreed softly. Without another word or backward glance, Michael left, the door closing behind him with a decisive click. The silence that followed was deafening. "Well," Elizabeth finally said, "that was certainly not how acquisition proposals typically conclude." There were a few nervous chuckles around the table, an attempt to break the tension. I appreciated the effort but couldn't bring myself to join in. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I'd expected in terms of substance, but the emotional impact was far greater than I had anticipated. Seeing Michael's pain and anger up close had shaken me more than I cared to admit. "Let's adjourn for today," I suggested, gathering my materials. "Thank you all for your support during this unusual transition. We'll reconvene Monday morning to finalize our strategic plan moving forward." As the board members filed out with murmured words of encouragement, Robert lingered behind. He'd known me long enough to see past my composed exterior. "Are you all right, Helen?" he asked once we were alone. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know." I knew he would be angry, but I hadn't fully considered how much this would hurt him. Not just professionally, but personally. "You couldn't have continued the charade indefinitely," Robert pointed out gently, "especially not with him targeting Westlake for acquisition." "No," I agreed, "but perhaps I could have found a better way to tell him. A private conversation before it reached this point." "And would he have believed you? Or would he have dismissed it as another example of his mother's impractical thinking?" The question gave me pause. Michael's vision of me had been so firmly established over decades. The hard-working but financially naive mother, the dutiful administrator with no particular business acumen. Would a private revelation have penetrated that deeply ingrained perception? Or would he have patronized me, perhaps even questioned my mental stability? "I don't know," I admitted. "But at least I would have spared him the public humiliation." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Give him time, Helen. This is a seismic shift in his understanding of you, of himself, of your entire relationship. He needs space to process it. And if he never does? If this permanently damages our relationship? Then you'll deal with that too," he said simply. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Always have been." After Robert left, I remained in the conference room, staring out at the manufacturing campus below. Employees moved between buildings, unaware that their company's leadership had just undergone a monumental transformation. By Monday, everyone would know that Helen Davis, the unassuming administrative assistant, was actually Helen Davis, CEO and majority owner. The revelation would ripple through the organization, changing how people spoke to me, interacted with me, perceived my decisions and directives. I had lived so long in the shadows that stepping fully into the light felt almost physically uncomfortable, like eyes adjusting to sudden brightness. Yet beneath the discomfort lay an undeniable sense of rightness, of finally claiming the recognition I had earned through decades of work and sacrifice. My phone vibrated with an incoming text from Michael. "Your secret is safe until Monday. After that, you're on your own. Don't contact me again." The words stung, but I hadn't expected anything different. Not yet. Michael needed time to process. Not just the professional implications of today's revelation, but the personal ones as well. The realization that his mother wasn't who he thought she was, that many of his assumptions about our relationship had been built on incomplete information. I texted back a simple, "Thank you," knowing anything more would be unwelcome at this point. The weekend passed in a strange limbo. I worked from home, preparing for Monday's official announcement and transition. No word came from Michael, though. I hadn't really expected any. Jennifer sent a brief, cold text requesting that I not contact them during this difficult time, as if I had been diagnosed with a terminal illness rather than revealed as a successful business leader. On Monday morning, I arrived at Westlake headquarters earlier than usual, wanting to be present as employees learned the news. The company-wide email had gone out at 7 a.m., announcing my appointment as CEO and providing a brief explanation of my historical role alongside Patricia. As I walked through the main entrance, using the front doors rather than my usual side entrance for the first time in decades, Linda's eyes widened in recognition and shock. "Ms. Davis. Should I call you Mrs. Davis now? Or I'm not sure what the proper—" "Helen is still fine, Linda," I assured her with a smile. "The only thing changing is my office location and official title. I'm still the same person." She nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced of that. "Congratulations on your appointment. It's quite a surprise." "I imagine it is," I acknowledged. "Change always takes some adjustment." As I made my way to the executive elevator, no longer needing to pretend I belonged in the administrative wing, employees stopped what they were doing to watch me pass. Some nodded respectfully, others stared in open astonishment, and a few even applauded spontaneously. The diverse reactions reflected the complex nature of what had happened, a revelation that challenged everyone's perception of not just me but of how the company had operated for decades. The executive floor bustled with unusual activity as I arrived. Diane stood as I approached, her expression a mixture of awe and embarrassment. "Ms. Davis," she began, "I want to apologize for any time I might have been less than respectful. I had no idea." I raised a hand to stop her. "There's no need to apologize, Diane. You've always been professional and courteous. That's all anyone could ask for." She nodded gratefully. "There have been several media inquiries already this morning, the Business Journal and the Tribune. Both want interviews about your unprecedented dual role at Westlake." "We anticipated that," I nodded. "Robert has prepared a press statement. I'll consider interview requests later this week, after the initial transition is complete." My first official action as the public CEO of Westlake was to call an all-staff meeting in the main assembly area of our manufacturing facility. Standing on a small platform overlooking hundreds of employees, from executive leadership to assembly line workers, I finally told my story openly. "Many of you have known me for years as Helen from administration," I began. "Some of you have brought me your paperwork, asked for my help with benefits questions, or simply said good morning as we passed in the hallways. What most of you didn't know is that behind that administrative role, I have been deeply involved in Westlake's strategic direction and operational decisions since co-founding this company with Patricia Westlake 37 years ago." I explained the unusual arrangement Patricia and I had devised, how it began as protection for my privacy as a single mother, and evolved into a unique management approach that allowed me to observe and guide the company from an unexpected vantage point. "I've learned more from that administrative desk than I ever could have from an executive office," I told them. "I've heard your concerns directly, without the filtering that often happens when speaking to senior leadership. I've seen firsthand how policies affect your daily work. I've witnessed your dedication, your frustrations, and your triumphs." The crowd listened with rapt attention as I outlined my vision for Westlake's future: continued innovation, sustainable growth, and a renewed commitment to the workforce that had built our success. "Some companies view employees as expenses to be minimized," I said, thinking of Michael's clinical approach to restructuring. "At Westlake, we know better. Our people are our greatest asset and competitive advantage. My commitment to you today is that this will remain central to our identity and strategy moving forward." After the assembly, I spent hours meeting with department heads and team leaders, answering questions and addressing concerns about the transition. By late afternoon, when I finally closed the door to my new office for a moment of quiet reflection, I felt both exhausted and strangely invigorated. For the first time in my professional life, I was operating without pretense or constraint, able to speak directly, make decisions openly, and receive credit for my contributions. The notification tone of my phone interrupted my thoughts. "Expecting Another media inquiry or message from the executive team. I was startled to see Jennifer's name on the screen. The message was brief and cold. We need to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Westfield Coffee on Michigan Avenue. No, please. No context. Just a demand. I considered declining, but curiosity won out. What could Jennifer possibly want to discuss after Michael had explicitly asked me not to contact them? I texted back a simple, "I'll be there," and returned to reviewing operational reports, pushing thoughts of tomorrow's meeting to the back of my mind. The next morning, I arrived at Westfield Coffee a few minutes early, selecting a quiet table near the back where our conversation wouldn't be easily overheard. Jennifer arrived precisely at 10, dressed immaculately as always in a designer suit that probably cost more than what most people thought I earned in a month. "Helen," she acknowledged curtly, sliding into the seat across from me without removing her sunglasses. "Jennifer," I replied evenly. "I'm surprised you wanted to meet." She removed her glasses then, revealing eyes rimmed with faint redness. "Believe me, this isn't a social call. I'm here because I need to understand exactly what happened and what it means for my future." The barista approached to take our order, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. Jennifer requested a non-fat latte with an extra shot. I ordered a simple black coffee. "What specifically do you want to know?" I asked once we were alone again. "Everything," she replied flatly. "How rich are you exactly? What's your actual net worth? And why would you hide it all these years, living in that modest house, driving a 5-year-old car, shopping at department stores instead of boutiques?" The questions, focused entirely on financial metrics rather than emotional or relational aspects, were so characteristically Jennifer that I almost laughed. Of course, her primary concern would be the monetary implications. "I own 80% of a company valued conservatively at $400 million, I stated plainly. "I have additional investments and properties managed through separate channels. As for why I lived modestly, it was initially to protect Michael from his father's interference, and later because I simply preferred it. Wealth doesn't need to be displayed to be real, Jennifer." She processed this information with visible calculations running behind her eyes. "And Michael knew nothing about any of this? Not the company ownership? Not the investments? Nothing?" "That's correct." Jennifer leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You have to understand what this has done to him. His investors are furious. His partners are questioning his judgment. His entire reputation is at stake. All because you decided to play some decades-long game of deception." "It wasn't a game," I corrected firmly. "It was a choice made for complex reasons that evolved over time. I never anticipated that Michael would target Westlake for acquisition, creating this direct conflict. But once you knew, you could have told him privately," she pressed. "Instead, you ambushed him in front of a room full of executives. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for him?" There was genuine distress in her voice, which surprised me. Perhaps her concern for Michael went deeper than I had given her credit for. "You're right," I acknowledged. "I could have handled the revelation differently. For that, I am sorry." Jennifer seemed taken aback by my ready admission. She regrouped quickly, her expression hardening again. "Sorry doesn't fix his professional reputation. Sorry doesn't explain to our social circle why we suddenly discovered his mother is actually a wealthy CEO rather than an administrative assistant." I studied her carefully, beginning to understand the real source of her distress. "This isn't just about Michael's professional embarrassment, is it? It's about how this revelation affects your social standing." A flush crept up her neck. "You don't understand our world, Helen. Perception matters. The narrative matters. We were the successful young couple who achieved everything through hard work and strategic networking. Now we're..." "What? The couple who didn't even know his mother was secretly wealthy? It makes us look foolish, uninformed, out of touch with our own family circumstances." I see, I said quietly. And how is Michael handling all this? Jennifer's expression softened slightly. Not well. He feels betrayed, manipulated. He keeps going over every interaction with you, questioning what was real and what wasn't. He's angry, Helen, more angry than I've ever seen him. I nodded, accepting this. I expected that. He has every right to be angry. But with time won't fix this, she interrupted. You fundamentally altered the power dynamic between you. Michael spent his adult life believing he was the successful one, the provider, the financially responsible party. Now he learns that was an illusion you carefully maintained. His entire self-image is shattered. Her assessment, though harsh, contained uncomfortable truths. I had considered the practical implications of my revelation, but perhaps underestimated its psychological impact on a son who had built his identity partly on the belief that he had surpassed his modest beginnings. "What do you want from me, Jennifer?" I asked directly. "Why did you want this meeting?" She straightened, her business demeanor returning. "Two things. First, Michael is considering legal action regarding your decades of financial non-disclosure. He believes there may be grounds for a case based on intentional misrepresentation that caused him material and reputational harm. He's welcome to explore that avenue," I replied calmly, though my heart ached at the thought of a legal battle with my own son. Robert assures me there are no viable grounds for such a claim. "And second," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "I need to know if you intend to formally acknowledge Michael as your heir to Westlake and your other assets." The question caught me off guard. In the midst of the revelation and transition, I hadn't given much thought to succession planning or estate matters. "That's a complex question that requires careful consideration," I said carefully. "Given the current state of our relationship, I think any discussion of inheritance would be premature." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "So you might disinherit your only child because of a disagreement?" "I didn't say that," I clarified. "But these decisions shouldn't be made in the heat of emotion. They require thoughtful planning with proper legal and financial guidance." "Of course," she replied with a thin smile. "Always the careful CEO, aren't you?" "Well, Michael deserves to know where he stands. If you're planning to cut him out because he dared to be angry about your decades of deception, he should be informed." I took a slow sip of my coffee, trying to maintain my composure in the face of her obvious attempt to provoke me. "Jennifer, I have always wanted what's best for Michael. That hasn't changed. But right now, we all need space to process this significant shift in our relationship." "Space," she repeated derisively. "How convenient." She gathered her designer handbag and stood. "You know, Helen, I always thought you were just a simple, hardworking woman who never had quite enough ambition to advance her career. I actually respected that about you, your seeming contentment with a modest life. Now I realize you may be the most calculating person I've ever met, maintaining a fiction for decades that shaped how everyone saw you. I'm not sure that's something to be proud of." With that parting shot, she strode out, leaving me alone with cooling coffee and complicated thoughts. Her words, though designed to wound, contained a kernel of truth that deserved reflection. Had my choice to remain in the shadows for so long been about protection and practicality, as I'd always told myself? Or had there been elements of calculation and control that I hadn't fully acknowledged? As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with meeting reminders and emails requiring attention, the never-ending demands of a CEO now operating in the open. I would address them all, of course. But first, I needed to process this conversation and its implications for my relationship with Michael going forward. Whatever damage had been done, whatever trust had been broken, I still believed reconciliation was possible. Not immediately, perhaps not even soon, but eventually. Because beneath the hurt and anger and misunderstanding, we remained mother and son, connected by bonds that might bend under pressure but wouldn't easily break. At least, that's what I hoped. Whether Michael shared that hope remained to be seen. The weeks following my public emergence as Westlake's CEO unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. News of my unusual career trajectory spread quickly through business circles, earning me profiles in several industry publications, and even a feature in the business section of the Chicago Tribune. The Secretary's CEO, How Helen Davis Built a $400 million Company from Behind an Administrative Desk, ran the headline, accompanied by a photograph of me standing in Westlake's manufacturing facility, surrounded by the products and people I had, quietly guided for decades. The media attention was disorienting after so many years of deliberate invisibility. Journalists probed for personal details I had spent a lifetime protecting, particularly regarding my relationship with Michael. I deflected these questions carefully, focusing instead on Westlake's business model and future plans. The last thing I wanted was to exacerbate Michael's humiliation by discussing our family conflict in the press. Within Westlake, the transition proceeded more smoothly than I had anticipated. After the initial shock, most employees adapted quickly to my new role. Many longtime staff members admitted they had suspected something unusual about my position over the years. "You always seemed to know about decisions before they were announced," my assistant Linda remarked. "And executives would implement your suggestions without question. I just figured you were exceptionally good at office politics." The executive team, particularly those who hadn't been privy to my secret, required more adjustment time. Gerald Fisher, our former interim CEO, struggled visibly with the sudden revision of his authority and status. During one tense leadership meeting, he challenged a strategic decision I'd presented, his tone more confrontational than the situation warranted. "With all due respect," he said, emphasizing the phrase in a way that suggested respect was precisely what he lacked. "We've been moving in a different direction for the past 3 years. Just because you've decided to step out from behind the curtain doesn't mean the entire company needs to change course." The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between Gerald and me. In the past, I would have found a subtle, indirect way to guide the conversation without challenging him openly. Now, operating as the acknowledged CEO, I had both the freedom and responsibility to lead differently. "I understand your perspective, Gerald," I replied calmly. "But what appears to you as a change in direction is actually a continuation of the strategy Patricia and I established before her death. The interim approach was exactly that. Interim. Now we're aligning fully with our long-term vision." Gerald's face flushed. "A vision you never bothered to share with the executive team." "Elements were shared as appropriate," I corrected. "But yes, the comprehensive strategy wasn't disclosed during the transition period. That was a calculated decision to maintain stability while legal and ownership matters were resolved following Patricia's death." The exchange ended there, but Gerald submitted his resignation the following week, citing philosophical differences with the new leadership direction. I accepted it without argument. His departure was unfortunate but not unexpected. The revelation of my true role had fundamentally altered the power dynamics he had grown comfortable with, and not everyone could adapt to such a dramatic shift. Meanwhile, I heard nothing directly from Michael. Through company channels, I learned that Davis Capital Partners had announced the termination of its pursuit of Westlake Industries, citing previously undisclosed ownership complications that made the acquisition untenable. The vague explanation raised questions among industry observers, but didn't explicitly reveal the maternal connection between the would-be acquirer and the target company's owner. 3 weeks after our confrontation, Robert forwarded me an email from Michael's attorney. The message was coldly professional, requesting a formal accounting of any financial support I had provided to Michael throughout his life, along with documentation of decisions where I had exercised undue influence under false pretenses. The legal posturing was clearly designed to intimidate, though Robert assured me the claims had no merit. "He's lashing out," Robert observed. testing whether legal pressure might give him leverage in a situation where he feels powerless. I instructed Robert to cooperate fully with the information request while making it clear we saw no basis for any legal claim. The documentation we provided outlined every financial contribution I had made to Michael's education, housing, and occasional expenses, all perfectly normal parental support, none of it contingent on misrepresented circumstances or conditions. 6 weeks passed with no further legal action. I began to hope Michael had recognized the futility of pursuing litigation against his own mother based on what essentially amounted to, "You didn't tell me you were wealthy." Then Jennifer's mother, Barbara, arrived unannounced at my office one Tuesday afternoon. "Helen," she greeted me with the artificial warmth I'd come to expect from her, air kissing near my cheeks without making actual contact. "You've certainly moved up in the world since we last met. This office is quite impressive." "Thank you, Barbara," I replied cautiously. "This is an unexpected visit. What can I do for you?" She settled into the chair across from my desk without waiting for an invitation, adjusting her designer suit with manicured hands. "I've come as a sort of family ambassador, you might say, a neutral party in this unfortunate situation." I doubted Barbara had ever been neutral about anything in her life, particularly regarding matters that affected her daughter and son-in-law. Still, I was curious enough about Michael's state of mind to hear her out. "I appreciate your concern," I said. "How are Michael and Jennifer doing?" Barbara sighed dramatically. "Struggling, as you might imagine. Michael's investors are demanding explanations. His firm's reputation has suffered. Jennifer is facing awkward questions from our social circle." She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. And of course, the timing couldn't be worse, with Jennifer being pregnant. The last bit of information hit me like a physical blow. Jennifer was pregnant? I was going to be a grandmother and no one had bothered to tell me? I wasn't aware Jennifer was expecting, I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. Barbara's expression registered momentary confusion, then shifted to false sympathy. "Oh dear, I assumed you knew. They found out just before all this." Unpleasantness occurred. Nearly 3 months along now. The calculated cruelty of withholding this information from me, then having it delivered casually by Barbara of all people, spoke volumes about where I stood with Michael and Jennifer. They hadn't just cut off communication. They were deliberately excluding me from significant family developments. I took a deep breath, refocusing on Barbara's purported purpose. "You mentioned coming as a family ambassador. Does that mean Michael sent you?" "Not exactly," she hedged. "But I've spoken extensively with both Michael and Jennifer about how to resolve this situation. They're both willing to consider reconciliation under certain conditions." "What conditions?" I asked, already wary of where this was heading. Barbara smiled thinly. "Well, first, there's the matter of Michael's professional reputation. A public statement from you, acknowledging that you deliberately withheld information that would have prevented his firm from pursuing Westlake, would go a long way toward repairing the damage. That would be an admission of wrongdoing where none exists," I pointed out. "I had no obligation to disclose my ownership position to Michael or anyone else outside proper regulatory channels." "Perhaps not legally," Barbara conceded with a dismissive wave. "But morally? You're his mother, Helen. Most mothers would go out of their way to prevent their children from professional embarrassment, not orchestrate it." I let that barb pass without comment. "What other conditions?" "Financial considerations," she continued smoothly. "Michael has invested substantial resources in the Westlake acquisition attempt. His firm stands to lose millions in sunk costs and opportunity costs. Some form of compensation would demonstrate your commitment to making amends." So there it was, the real purpose of Barbara's visit. Not reconciliation, but extraction. They wanted money, packaged as compensation for supposed damages I had caused. "Anything else?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Just one more thing, Barbara smiled. A formal succession plan naming Michael as your heir to Westlake Industries and your other assets. Jennifer feels strongly that your grandson or granddaughter deserves security, regardless of any temporary disagreements between adults. The sheer audacity of their demands left me momentarily speechless. They wanted me to publicly humiliate myself, pay Michael millions for his failed acquisition attempt, and legally commit to leaving him my entire estate, all while they continued to exclude me from their lives and my future grandchild's life. Thank you for bringing these considerations to my attention, I said carefully. I'll need time to think about them. Barbara nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Of course, but don't take too long. Jennifer's baby shower is in 3 weeks. Wouldn't it be lovely if this were all resolved by then, so the grandmother could attend? After Barbara left, I sat alone in my office, watching the afternoon light shift across the manufacturing campus below. Employees moved between buildings, focused on their work, unaware of the personal drama unfolding in the executive suite above. Their lives continued with straightforward purpose, while mine had become entangled in emotional and legal complexities I had never anticipated. I thought about the baby, my grandchild, growing inside Jennifer even as they used its existence as leverage in their negotiations with me. The manipulation was transparent and crude, but the fact of the child was real and meaningful. Would I be excluded from this new life because of choices I had made decades ago? Choices I had believed were in Michael's best interest? After careful consideration, I asked Robert to draft a response to Barbara's overtures. The message was clear. I would not issue a public statement accepting blame for Michael's failed acquisition attempt. I would not pay compensation for his firm's business decision to pursue Westlake without adequate due diligence. And I would not commit to any specific estate plans under pressure or as a condition of family reconciliation. However, I was open to private personal conversations with Michael about rebuilding our relationship without preconditions or financial demands, and I expressed my sincere desire to be part of my grandchild's life, offering unconditional support for the baby regardless of the state of adult relationships in the family. Barbara never responded directly to this message. Instead, an formal invitation to Jennifer's baby shower arrived at my home address 2 weeks later, a peace offering of sorts, or perhaps a recognition that their leverage had failed to produce the desired results. I accepted with a brief note expressing my pleasure at being included in this celebration of new life. The baby shower, held at Barbara's sprawling North Shore estate, was an elaborate affair with nearly 60 women in attendance. I arrived early, bearing a gift I had selected with particular care, a handcrafted wooden cradle from an artisan in northern Michigan, accompanied by a trust fund I had established for the child's education. The financial gift wasn't mentioned on the card. That information would be provided to Michael and Jennifer privately, through proper legal channels. Jennifer greeted me with brittle politeness, accepting the cradle with murmured thanks. Michael couldn't be here today, she explained unnecessarily, as if I might have expected to find my son mingling among the female guests at a traditional baby shower. I understand, I replied. Please give him my best. The event proceeded with orchestrated cheerfulness, guests exclaiming over tiny clothes and practical baby gear while sipping champagne and nibbling on color-coordinated desserts. I observed more than participated, noting how Jennifer's friends clustered around her protectively, as if I might somehow damage her or the baby with my presence alone. Barbara made a point of introducing me to several guests as Jennifer's mother-in-law, Helen Davis, CEO of Westlake Industries, emphasizing my title with a meaningful glance. The revelation invariably prompted curious looks and whispered conversations. Once I had moved away, I was a curiosity here, the previously invisible mother-in-law now revealed as a secret business magnate. As the formal gift-opening portion of the event concluded, Jennifer approached me directly for the first time that afternoon. "Thank you for coming," she said, her tone more genuine than earlier. "And for the cradle. It's beautiful." "I'm glad you like it," I replied. "My father was a woodworker. He made a similar cradle for Michael when he was born." Jennifer's expression softened slightly at this personal detail. "I didn't know that about your father." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I acknowledged without accusation. "A lot Michael doesn't know either." She nodded, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly. "He's still very angry." "I understand that," I said. "But this baby deserves to know his or her grandmother, regardless of the complications between adults. I hope we can find a way forward that puts the child's interests first." Jennifer studied me carefully, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "It's a boy," she said finally. "We found out last week. Michael wants to name him after his grandfather, your father." The unexpected gesture brought tears to my eyes. Despite everything, Michael was honoring my father, a man he had never met but had heard stories about throughout his childhood. It was a small olive branch, but significant nonetheless. "James," I said softly. "James Davis. It's a good name." "James William," Jennifer corrected. "William after Michael's mentor at his first firm." I nodded, accepting the modification without comment. "May I ask when you're due?" "August 17th, she replied. "The doctor says everything looks perfect so far." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. "And Jennifer, I want you to know, regardless of what happens between Michael and me, I'm here for you and the baby, whatever you need." She regarded me with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "Why would you offer that after how we've treated you? The legal threats, the demands." "Because family is more complicated than balance sheets and legal positions," I replied simply. "And because becoming a parent changes everything. Michael will understand that soon enough." The conversation ended there as another guest approached to congratulate Jennifer, but something had shifted between us. A small crack had appeared in the wall of hostility, allowing for the possibility of something different moving forward. The following week, I received a text message from Michael, the first direct communication since our confrontation in the Westlake boardroom. "Mom, we should talk. Coffee tomorrow, 8 a.m. Westfield." I replied immediately, "I'll be there." I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, selecting the same quiet corner table where I had met with Jennifer weeks earlier. Michael arrived precisely at 8, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. The confident swagger that typically characterized his movements was absent, replaced by a wary caution as he approached. "Thank you for meeting me," he said formally, settling into the chair across from me. "Of course," I replied. "I've been hoping we could talk." He nodded, his expression guarded. "Jennifer told me about your conversation at the baby shower, about wanting to be involved with James regardless of everything else." "I meant it," I confirmed. "He's my grandson. Nothing changes that." Michael studied me for a long moment, as if trying to reconcile the mother he thought he knew with the woman who now sat before him. CEO, majority shareholder, self-made success. "I've been angry," he finally said. Furious, actually. I felt like my entire childhood was based on a lie, like I never really knew you at all. "I understand that," I acknowledged, "and I'm truly sorry for the pain this has caused you. But, Michael, the mother who raised you, who loved you, supported you, cheered for you at every milestone, that was the real me. The only thing I concealed was my professional role and financial position." "But those aren't small things," he countered. "You let me believe you were struggling financially. You accepted my help with expenses you didn't need help with. Do you have any idea how patronizing that feels in retrospect? Like you were humoring me?" His raw hurt was palpable, and I recognize now how my well-intentioned deception had wounded his pride in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. "I never meant to patronize you. I said softly. When you offered help with the water heater or property taxes, I saw it as you wanting to contribute, to take care of me the way I had taken care of you. I accepted because it seemed important to you, not because I was humoring you. But it was all based on false premises, he insisted. You didn't need my help. You were worth millions all along. Needing help isn't just about money, Michael. There's value in the gesture itself, in the relationship it represents. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. When you have James, you'll understand. There will be things he wants to do for you someday. Small kindnesses, gestures of love and support. And even if you don't need those things practically speaking, you'll accept them because they matter to him, because they're how he shows love. Michael was quiet for a moment, absorbing this perspective. I still don't understand why you maintained the deception for so long, he said finally. When I was a child, maybe there was some justification. But as an adult, when I started my career, you could have told me then. Perhaps I should have, I conceded. But by then, the separate identities had become so established, so functional in their own ways. And truthfully, I wanted you to succeed on your own terms, not as Helen Davis's son, with all the expectations and assumptions that would have accompanied that identity. So instead, I became the man who tried to acquire his mother's company. Without knowing it, he said with a grimace. Much better. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile at his flash of dark humor. It was so characteristically Michael, finding the ironic angle even in difficult situations. Not my finest moment as a mother, I acknowledged. I should have told you as soon as I realized Davis Capital was targeting Westlake. He nodded, accepting this partial concession. The legal threats, he said after a pause. That was excessive. I was angry and humiliated, looking for some way to regain control of the narrative. I've instructed my attorney to withdraw all inquiries and potential claims. Thank you, I said simply. And Barbara's visit? Was that your idea or Jennifer's? Michael winced visibly. Neither. That was entirely Barbara taking matters into her own hands. Jennifer was mortified when she found out. The demands, the conditions, none of that came from us. This surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Barbara had always been the type to insert herself where she wasn't wanted, confident in her superior ability to manage others' affairs. I'm glad to hear that, I replied. Honestly, it didn't seem like your approach. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks about what kind of father I want to be, what values I want to pass on to James. He met my eyes directly. And I keep coming back to you, how you raised me to work hard, to earn what I received, to never expect things to be handed to me. Those values served you well, I observed. Look at what you've accomplished. But here's the thing, he continued, leaning forward slightly. You taught me those values while secretly building and running a major company. You worked harder than anyone I've ever known, earned every bit of your success, never took shortcuts, or relied on connections or family money. I waited, sensing he was working his way toward something important. The way you raised me, he said slowly, making me believe we had modest means, teaching me to appreciate every opportunity and advantage. That wasn't just about protecting me from Dad or letting me find my own path. It was about instilling values that mattered to you, values that had shaped your own success. Yes, I agreed softly. That's exactly right. I still wish you had told me the truth sooner, he added. But I'm starting to understand why you didn't. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a beginning, an opening toward a new kind of relationship built on more complete understanding. I'd like us to start over, I suggested, not forgetting everything that's happened, but moving forward with honesty and clarity. I want to be part of your life, Michael. Part of James's life. He nodded slowly, I want that too. But it will take time. Trust has to be rebuilt. I understand, I said. I'm patient, and I'll be here whenever you're ready. The conversation shifted then to more immediate matters: Jennifer's pregnancy, the nursery they were preparing, Michael's work in the aftermath of the failed Westlake acquisition. The tension between us hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had eased enough to allow normal conversation to flow. As we prepared to leave, Michael hesitated, then asked the question I had been expecting since our confrontation. So what happens to Westlake eventually? Do you have a succession plan? I smiled at his directness. I'm working on comprehensive plans with Robert. Westlake's future leadership will include a mix of current executives who have demonstrated commitment to our values and culture, with appropriate ownership structures in place. I paused, then added, and yes, as my son, you will be included in my estate planning. But Michael, that's a separate matter from our personal relationship. I'm not using my assets as leverage or conditions. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed at the implied reference to Barbara's inappropriate demands. I understand. And for what it's worth, I'm not interested in taking over Westlake. It's not my area of expertise or passion. I just wanted to know where things stood. Fair enough, I nodded. Complete transparency from now on. As we walked out together, an unexpected thought struck me. Would you like to see Westlake sometime? Really see it, I mean. The manufacturing floor, the research labs, the people who make everything work? Understanding what I built might help. You understand me better. Michael considered this for a moment, then nodded. I'd like that. Maybe next week? Just let me know when, I replied, feeling a cautious hope rise within me. I'll clear my schedule. 1 month later, I stood in a hospital waiting room with Robert, who had kindly offered to accompany me during the long hours of Jennifer's labor. Barbara was there too, of course, alternating between pacing nervously and checking her phone for social media updates. Shortly after midnight, Michael emerged from the delivery room, his face transformed by a mixture of exhaustion and wonder that I remembered well from his own birth. It's a boy, he announced, his voice thick with emotion. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Jennifer is doing great. Barbara immediately enveloped him in a hug, already pulling up the camera app on her phone. Let me get a picture for Instagram before we go in. The first Davis grandson. This is momentous. Michael gently extracted himself from her embrace. Actually, Mom gets to go in first, he said firmly, looking at me. She's been waiting a long time for this. The significance of his choice wasn't lost on me or on Barbara, whose expression flickered briefly with surprise and displeasure before resettling into a tight smile. Of course, she said smoothly. Family first. Michael led me to the hospital, room where Jennifer rested, looking tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She smiled when she saw me, with none of the wariness that had characterized our previous interactions. Helen, she said softly, come meet your grandson. I approached carefully, emotion threatening to overwhelm me as I gazed down at the perfect, tiny face. James William Davis had his father's strong chin and his mother's delicate nose, a unique combination of features that would evolve and define themselves in the years to come. He's beautiful, I whispered, gently touching his impossibly small hand. Absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold him? Jennifer offered, already shifting to transfer the baby. As I cradled James in my arms, feeling his solid weight and warmth, a profound sense of completion washed over me. This moment, this connection between generations, was what truly mattered. Not corporate titles or hidden identities or financial assets, but the enduring bonds of family that transcended misunderstandings and wounded pride. Michael moved to stand beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder as we both gazed at the newest member of our family. The gesture was small but significant, a physical acknowledgement of our reconnection, of the new understanding taking root between us. "I was thinking," he said quietly, "we'd like you to be really involved in his life. Not just visits now and then, but regular time together. He should know his grandmother. The real you, all of you." "I'd like that very much," I replied, blinking back tears. "And Mom?" Michael added, his voice taking on a hint of his old humor. "Feel free to teach him everything you know about business. Just don't wait until he's 40 to tell him you're secretly running a company, okay?" I laughed, the sound mingling with James's soft breathing and the quiet beeping of hospital monitors. "Deal," I promised, sealing a new covenant between us. One built on truth, understanding, and the profound love that had never wavered, even in our darkest moments. As I handed James back to Jennifer, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of secrets kept and truths withheld had finally lifted, allowing me to step fully into all aspects of my identity: CEO, mother, and now grandmother. The path forward wouldn't be perfectly smooth. Trust would need to be rebuilt, new boundaries established, old hurts healed through time and consistent honesty. But standing there with my family, I knew with absolute certainty that revealing my true self, however painfully it had happened, had been the right choice. For the first time in decades, I was fully seen and known by those who mattered most. And in that recognition lay a freedom more valuable than any corporate success or financial achievement I had ever experienced. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.